Daily Tech News Show is made possible by you, the listeners. Thanks to everyone, including Ken Hayes, Philip Shane, Brad, and everyone. Welcome our new patron, Peter. Yay. On this episode of DTNS, Apple acquires Pixelmator, maybe. Regional broadband continues to go to the sky, and will pour out a little liquor for Windows 10, but you still have options. This is the Daily Tech News for Friday, November 1st, 2024. From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
At the edge of the 314, I'm Patrick Norton.
From the GTA, I'm Jenn Cutter.
Drawing the top tech stories in Cleveland, I'm Len Peralta.
Recovering from a sugar high, I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
Jenn Cutter, so nice to have you back. It's been a minute. How you doing?
I'm great to be back. I am playing so much hockey right now. I just played 4 games in 5 days, and I'm feeling it. Usually that's more playoffs and tournaments, so starting the season like that, a little rough.
Well, what isn't going to be rough, well, depending on how you feel about your news, is the quick hits, which we will start with right now. Amazon's upgraded AI-powered Alexa, initially set to launch this year with improved conversational abilities and ChatGPT-like intelligence, is now delayed until 2025. Bloomberg sources say teams were informed of the extended timeline, and feedback from beta testers of the Let's Chat feature indicated lukewarm responses. Earlier this summer, Fortune reported that the new Alexa might never even be ready. It's going to be ready, but apparently not until next year.
Indonesia has halted the sale of Google Pixel smartphones due to its local content requirements, echoing a similar move earlier this week against Apple's iPhone 16. To sell in Indonesia, smartphones must meet a 40% local value threshold through manufacturing, software development, or investments in local tech innovation. This rule is managed by Indonesia's Ministry of Industry and is meant to strengthen the domestic economy by capitalizing on its large consumer market, and is enforced through a local content level certification system.
Google is shifting its typical Android release schedule, moving Android 16's launch to spring of 2025 rather than its usual fall timeline. Confirming the news, Google said that the earlier release is supposed to align better with device launches, where more devices can adopt the latest Android version sooner. The company also plans for a major Q2 release each year, with a smaller Q4 SDK update that adds features without significantly altering core systems.
Comcast is considering spinning off its cable networks into a separate company amid continued decline in subscribers, according to company president Mike Cavanaugh. This potential new entity would focus on Comcast cable channels like MSNBC, CNBC, E, and Bravo, but would exclude streaming services like Peacock and broadcast networks. In Q3 alone, Comcast lost 365,000 cable TVs subscribers, driving this re-evaluation of its cable assets.
Google's Gemini AI assistant is gaining smart home controls with a new Google Home extension that lets users manage smart devices through simple chats. Currently available to Android users in the Google Home public preview program, the feature enables controls for certain security devices like cameras, locks, gates, and doors. But the extension isn't fully compatible with all smart devices yet and can't initiate preset routines. All right, let's talk a little bit about Apple's earnings. Apple's really been on one this week. Giving us all sorts of stuff, as it promised last week that it would do. So yeah, it kept that promise. But the company reported its fiscal 2024 fourth quarter results, achieving a record revenue of $94.9 billion. That's up 6% over the previous year. iPhone sales up 6% year over year to $46.22 billion. Mac sales also up 2% year over year to $7.74 billion. iPad sales also up 8% year over year to $6.95 billion. However, wearables, home, and accessories, which is one they put them all together, were down 3% year over year to $9.4 billion. Still a lot of money, but hey, it was down. Also, kind of a regional thing. Apple's revenue was down 0.3% year over year to $15 billion in China, but it was up 7.6% to $5.93 billion in Japan. Also up 16.6% to $7.38 billion in the rest of Asia Pacific. Up 11% to $29.92 billion in Europe. Apple's services division, which includes the App Store, Apple TV Plus, and all the shows that you might watch on that, Apple Music, also up 12% year over year to $24.97 billion. That's a new quarterly record. Still under analyst estimates, but looking at this, Apple had a pretty great quarter. We were starting to have a lot of conversations about, what's Apple doing? Was the Apple Vision Pro, a dud? And how is the company going to, sort of come back from this? And I don't know, Patrick. It seems like Apple's doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, Apple makes money, and then it makes more 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 money. I mean, how long has it been since they've actually lost money in any meaningful way?
It's been a long time. Yeah.
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 Yay.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that my one watch purchase was not enough to help them beat that estimate.
I know. Jen, how could you possibly just buy the one watch?
Well, not in this quarter, but eventually I am looking at the iPhone 16, mostly because I kind of want that gorgeous camera. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, that's also been part of the conversation, is sort of like, for example, I have an iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's great. I got it not even a year ago, so I'm like, there's just no way I need a new phone.
Yeah,
I bought a Mac
my
Mini.
11, my nice skinny 11. It's great.
There you go.
Nice.
And yeah, I bought a Mac Mini earlier this week because Apple announced them, and I'd been waiting for that for quite some time. It is interesting to me that, China is a big market for Apple, and it's getting a little problematic for Apple, for a variety of reasons. Because yes, Apple can make a lot of money, but that is a huge market, and if China kind of continues to pull back from Apple, I think Apple is, let's look at the next quarter and see where we are. I also think that Apple, took some swings. The Apple Vision Pro, for example. I've got one behind me. There it is. A little bit, out of reach. But yeah, it's, the company has sort of been like, all right, early adopter stuff. We did what we did, type thing. But
Right.
I think a lot of people would also say that that's not a win for the company. So yeah, I think we're looking good here. But at the same time, I think the services division is where I think it's the most interesting. Because that's where, Apple can just acquire companies.
Yeah, well, I would also point out that analysts are insane, except when they're not. Because it's like, it's weird to watch them be like, that wasn't what we expected you to hit. I've also seen analysts get upset because their expectations were beaten. But, Apple TV huge redesign, in the last few months, where they they made the video and the movie app disappear, and it was all sublimated into the Apple TV app, and it makes it almost impossible to find anything. And I'm not surprised that maybe they didn't grow as much as they expected to or wanted to, but they're also doing a lot of weird experiments to consolidate their control over the user experience on Apple TV. I don't know. I am curious.
I am too. I'm also curious about Apple announcing that it's acquiring the app Pixelmator. That's the company. Well, that's the company behind a variety of apps, image editing apps like Pixelmator Pro. Photomator is another one. The Pixelmator team says no immediate changes to their apps, basically meaning we will be a standalone product for now. But for everybody who remembers Dark Sky,
Pour one out.
the acquisition still pending regulatory approval, so it's not a done deal yet. But let's just say it is. I still have PTSD about the Dark Sky situation. That used to be my absolute favorite weather app, and once Apple acquired it, and I don't know, made it something way, I don't know, less cool.
I can
than it
live
used
with
to
the
be.
interface changes, but I think Sarah and I have discussed probably several times on this podcast where we would get a notification and there's going to be rain in 5 minutes, and we would look up and we'd be like, it's a blue sky. Dark sky's finally lost its wham, and the rain would come down. You'd be like, okay, dark sky. Okay, I see what you're doing there. And it
They
was
were
this
that good, eh?
well, they basically came up with an algorithm that is my understanding. If they took like all of these weather predictions, they monitored them all, they looked at what actually happened, and then based on, because some weather algorithms were better in some parts of the country than others, it would basically average them out till it got the most accurate complication and kind of complication. I'm talking about watches, the most accurate sort of they would just sort of smoosh them all down into whatever worked best in your particular location. And yes, it was amazing, at least in Northern California. Weather's simple in Northern California, but it was pretty accurate elsewhere. And now it's, now I'm laughing because it'll tell me there's no rain coming, and I'll wake up and it'll be just absolutely slamming down rain. And I don't know if that's a Midwestern thing or climate change thing,
Well,
or if they
and-
just
and
screwed up my beloved weather app thing.
Yeah, the Dark Sky, for anybody who's not familiar, I mean, Dark Sky was just a really cool third-party weather app. It had so much data. It was really accurate. I mean, it was
A
the
bunch of
weather
weather
app.
nudes built
Yeah.
the ultimate weather app.
Yeah, and when Apple acquired it, I was like, all right, then the Apple's native weather app will just get better. But it got worse somehow.
Well, fingers crossed for the new guys here.
Fingers crossed, indeed.
Or just start pouring one out for Pixelmator Pro.
True.
Sorry, that was rude. It'll be fine. They won't change anything. It'll be glorious.
All right. So on Thursday, the European Commission announced a plan to sign a contract with SpaceRise to develop Iris Squared, a 290 satellite broadband network. The estimated cost is around 10 billion euros, about 10.9 billion USD. Iris Squared program, aka Infrastructure for Resilience, Interconnectivity, and Security by Satellite, is part of an EU plan to build out a sovereign satellite broadband network independent of foreign or commercially owned systems like Starlink and OneWeb. Europe isn't alone here. Canada's federal government is providing $2.14 billion in loans to Ottawa-based Telesat to build its light-speed broadband satellite network. The Quebec provincial government is providing $400 million in loans to MDS to build its satellites in the province. Because, I got to get the Canadian angle in there somewhere.
This is interesting. You hear a lot about Starlink, for sure. Satellite internet, Starlink. Planes are contemplating adding Starlink to their systems. OneWeb specifically as well. But the municipality aspect of this is kind of cool.
I mean, the idea is to basically have an alternative to Starlink and OneWeb in case there are situations where either it is a direct need, you have a natural disaster, you don't want to rely on a commercial provider to provide broadband services, whether it's to first responders, some sort of aid delivery, or just general internet access to people who need it. And so currently, Starlink, for more, whether you like or dislike the company, is like the only real player globally. So you see it having deals with airlines. You see it having deals with
Well,
companies in other countries.
it's
They're,
the
they're-
least expensive option
it is the least
globally.
expensive. Yeah,
It is the fastest global option. It is not the only global option.
it is.
It's probably the most
Yeah.
robust global option.
It is
But-
it's the most and it offers the most coverage in terms of where whether a company or a country might be located. And I think this is one of those things where the EU feels that having a similar service under their control is more beneficial to them, not only from just sort of an internet sovereignty kind of like strategic outlook, but hey, we can offer this to our air carriers, we can offer this to our hotels, we can offer it to our cruise lines. In other words, having some sort of service that they can monetize for the benefit of the EU and not just to SpaceX.
Jen, what's the situation where you are up in Canada? I mean, does this seem attractive to you?
There's a very old but accurate line that Canada is 3 telecom companies in a trench coat. So I do have concerns about where this might be going, because Bell is kind of having this ongoing argument with the government about how they should be able to block anything at any time with no oversight, and you won't even know why. Again, because this all comes back to hockey, because they want to stop pirated hockey broadcasts because they own one of the networks that broadcasts hockey and also part
And
of
curling.
the team. Yes, the other national sport of Canada. But like the reason Quebec is getting involved is that Quebec likes jobs and tech jobs, which is why they get to count separate from the federal government because they need to be in the news. It is good that Canada is investing in tech and hardware in tech, because that is not something we are really known for. If you ask somebody to name a Canadian tech company, they're going to go with Shopify, excuse me, because that's just what we're known for. Like Prime Minister Trudeau called this Canada's largest upcoming space program. And I'm thinking like, wow, this is going to like lap the Canadarm in terms of how much money we're spending on a physical thing. So we'll see if it also comes to fruition at all, because they're planning on some stuff by 2026, which will be readier earlier than the EU thing. So the world will have an example of how it can go or how it won't.
There is definitely a sort of mindset of building up in the same way that we see the what happened to supply chains during the pandemic, and that we're kind of like, let's bring some of these supply chains, or the most crucial ones, closer to our shores. I think for a lot of countries, just having these keystone technologies available and under their control is part of a sentiment that's pretty global, right? So it's not just we need to have chip fabrications in the US.
There's historical precedents, right? There was GLONASS, which is still out, the Soviet version of GPS, which was an alternative because they knew they couldn't use GPS should the Cold War go hot. So they started working on their own alternative. And I think certainly everything going on between the Ukraine and Russia has done nothing but make a lot of large countries want their own control over their own system, especially with all the vagaries of do they turn Starlink off? Is turn it on? Is Russia using it illegally? How are they doing that? What's going on? It's like, well, I bought something that said mobile in Germany and brought it over to the, you know what I mean? Like it's a little, people want control, and they want to make sure their enemies don't have access to their systems in terms of distribution and stuff. It's going to be wild to watch this over the next couple of years.
It really
the idea
is.
there's going to be multiple competing satellite internet. I don't know. I also feel really, really bad for astronomers.
Yes. There was Skelly 2909 said astronomers would be so pleased to have multiple mega satellite constellations literally blocking their view of the night sky.
Space junk. Yeah, it's a whole thing. If you have thoughts on this or anything else that we talk about on the show, future show, past shows, do join our conversation in our Discord. It's a fun crew. You can join by linking to a Patreon account at patreon.com/DTNS. On October 14th, 2025, support for Windows 10 ends. No updates, no patches, no nothing. Unless you cough up $30 for the extended security updates or ESU, consumer users who do that will continue to receive Windows 10 security updates for 1 year. Corporate customers will be charged $61 for that 1 year, $122 for a second year, and $244 for a third year of updates. Consumers interested in this program can sign up closer to the end of official support. So, Patrick, we're not there yet, but what do you make of these options to extend Windows 10's life? I mean, circling the drain a bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also kind of fascinated that, companies can get 3 years, but consumers can only get one. That's still kind of, it just irks me for no particularly valid reason. So, you check for Windows 11 compatibility or a notification pops up Windows 10, this PC can't run Windows 11 and sorry, this PC does not currently meet the minimum system requirements to run Windows 11. Either way, it's annoying. Look, you can pay Microsoft the VIG, which is 3x what I paid for my last Windows 10 bundle, like the license. I think literally that's 3 times what I paid for my last 3 Windows 10 licenses. If you haven't, download PC Health Check app. And it's really funny because some of the things I hadn't run into, you need at least a 64 gigabyte hard drive, and it will tell you that your hard drive is too small, which made me laugh because, like, who's running Windows 10 in 64 gigabytes of storage? If you have a pre-2017 Intel or an AMD Zen 2 processor, basically, AMD Zen 2 processor after 2019 or 2017 and later Intel processors, that's the bare minimum you're going to need to run Windows 11. If you only have 4 gigabytes of memory, you can't run Windows 11. I want to know how you're running Windows now in 4 gigabytes of memory. That seems incredibly painful. If your display is smaller than 720p or you have no DX12 support, it's probably time to upgrade. The real problem most of us are going to run into, though, is not having Secure Boot or TPM 2.0. Secure Boot's all about controlling the active operating system to fight ransomware or malware, or just making a pain in the ass to run a second operating system like Linux. You need to check actually though your BIOS, your UEFI firmware, and make sure, because in many cases people actually have Secure Boot and TPM 2.0, they just don't have them turned on. In theory, like there's a TPM chip on the motherboard or a module that plugs into header pins on the motherboard, or it could be virtual, it could be firmware. It's been a requirement for Windows since 2016. Windows 10 required TPM 1.2, 11 wants TPM 2.0. And before you ask, because I always forget, it is Trusted Platform Module. It helps with encryption. It's supposed to fight firmware attacks. It isn't used in countries where Western encryption is banned. Hi, China. And it does a lot of things that irritate the snot out of security and privacy people that I will not go down the rabbit hole right now. So you've run your PC health check. It tells you don't have TPM or Secure Boot. You've upgraded your BIOS. You've checked. There's nothing to turn on. You could buy a motherboard with TPM 2.0, or in some crazy cases, if your motherboard has the space, you could track down the right TPM module and plug it into that motherboard. I would check the price of the TPM module versus the motherboard. I would make sure I had the right TPM 2.0 module, because it would be really sad to pay more than a new motherboard costs to buy a TPM module for your old motherboard. Honestly, like the system I'm running on right now has a new processor and motherboard coming. There's a machine all over, to my right, that's an all-in-one that's going Linux because it's time for me to bring open source operating systems back into my life again in a meaningful way. The guts from this system are going to be a server, or they're going to go to my cousin for something he wants to play around with. If you've got a fave, I'd love if you tweeted at Patrick Norton or emailed me. But seriously, I think Linux for a lot of people is a great option, at least for geeky, enthusiastic people or people who are sort of curious about open source. I think Linux is a great alternative. Otherwise, though, you're probably upgrading your hardware, whether you want to or not, in October of 2026.
Now, Jen, I know you're a Windows person as well. I mean, do you have systems that are affected by this?
All of them. I do not have a single machine in the house that has TPM. And I looked into the cost of
Wow.
switching. They're old machines. They're still beefy enough. My render time and resolve is actually great. So I haven't felt the need to switch. I do most of my gaming on consoles these days. So that's pretty good. But
That
you mentioned
helps.
Linux. I had a couple friends switch to Linux because they are absolutely sick of the AI stuff in Windows. And thanks to the
It's
Steam Deck
annoying.
of all things, there's a lot of good gaming you can get done in Linux these days. So I'm going to let them report back as their daily driver. But I'll probably still stick with Windows 10 as long as the programs I need for work still work. And so far, that's it. Like, I have been looking around to see, like, ooh, do I have a corporate Windows 10 somewhere? Because, like, I would not mind the 3 years of upgrades, but they've absolutely got my money for the 1 year of security updates. I am going to pay it 100%.
I understand. It's just to not have to deal with it for another year. $30 is probably a quite reasonable price.
Yeah, exactly. And if like tech hardware prices come down too, then I'd be like, okay, I'll jump on it right now. But right now, it's not a chance I'm spending money on new hardware.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Is you say like some of these systems are a little long in the tooth, but they work for me. The whole sort of like you have to get the latest and greatest at all times. Wouldn't that be nice if we all did that? But pocketbooks, there are all sorts of reasons why you'd be like, I don't need it, I can't afford it, or something in between.
I was laughing, the group I work with, we inherited an Apple Mac Pro, one of the towers, which aesthetically I still think is beautiful. But for people who run video, I still think it's the dumbest enclosure design ever, because you end up with this beautiful tower and like 17 boxes plugged into it. So you have enough storage and stuff. But I was laughing because somebody's like, oh, we have this tower. I'm like, great. I don't think there's any operating system updates for that. And it's, but it's like, it happens on other platforms. I think it's just because there's so many Windows users out there, there's going to be a much louder noise about this one.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, next October will be interesting to see all of the crying, because like not everybody's paying attention to this stuff. It's going to really surprise them when they start getting pop-ups.
Well, it's also funny, right? Because it's like, okay, next year, it doesn't affect me right this
too
second.
far away
but
right
like,
now.
well, it's going to though. It's gonna creep up on you.
You thought Copilot notifications were annoying. Wait till your
You like
operating
it or
system
not.
screaming
Yeah.
in your face that you're insecure and you're going to die screaming. Yeah. Looking forward to it, Windows.
We would like to not die screaming on the show, and to help us not do that is Len Peralta, who has been drawing a tech story throughout the show. Len, what do you have for us?
I'm a Mac person, so I just have to say for Windows 10, just let it die. And that's what this is.
Oh,
Just let it go. Let it go, folks. It's done. I know
that's
it's
so
not that much to spend, but come on. Just let it go. If you're a Windows person and you want to, I don't know, not celebrate, but it is All Saints Day today. So maybe this will be a perfect gift for somebody who is a Windows user in your life. You can, of course, go to my Patreon, patreon.com/Len, get this for you at the DTNS lover level. Or if you want to go to just the old fashioned way, go to my online store, purchase it there, along with maybe a custom drawn holiday card. Because, folks, it is November 1st and it is time to be thinking about the holidays. So give that some thought. And yes, just let it go. Let it go. Let it go, everybody. Let it go.
just pour out a little liquor. That's sort of the theme of the show. Yeah, it really is. Thank you, Len, as always. Patrick Norton, also thank to you. Let folks know where they can keep up with your latest.
Oh, I think I'm at Patrick Norton on all of the social replacements for Twitter. I'm still hanging out on Twitter watching things burn because apparently that's punk rock. And of course, keep an eye on AVXL in November, avxl.com.
Excellent. Just a reminder, Tom's Top 5 is the show where Tom breaks down the top 5 things that you need to know about technology. And this week, He's on vacation, but he's still at it. He's counting down the top 5 ways to distract yourself during the U.S. elections. You can catch it at dailytechnewsshow.com, Daily Tech News Show on TikTok, DTNS Pix, PIX on Instagram, and YouTube at youtube.com/Daily Tech News Show. Patrons, stick around for the extended show, Good Day Internet. It is Friday. You know what that means. It's quiz time. Windows has a long and storied history. We've been talking about Windows on the show. Do you know the answers to our Windows questions? You can also catch the show live Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC. You can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. We'll be back on Monday talking about EV battery myths with Tim Stevens, because he would know. This week's episodes of Daily Tech News Show were created by the following people: host, producer, and writer Tom Merritt, host, producer, and writer Sarah Lane, executive producer and booker Roger Chang, producer, writer, and co-host Rob Dunwood, video producer Joe Kuntz, producer at large Anthony Lemos, Spanish language host, writer, and producer Dan Campos, science correspondent Dr. Nikki Ackermans, social media producer and moderator Zoe Detterding. Our mods: Beatmaster, W. Scottus1, BioCow, Capt Kipper, Steve Guadarrama, Paul Reese, Matthew J. Stevens, aka Gadget Virtuoso, and JD Galloway. Mod and video hosting by Dan Christensen. Music and art provided by Martin Bell, Dan Luters, Mustafa A., Acast, and Len Peralta. Live art performed by Len Peralta. Acast ad support from Tatiana Matias. Patreon support from Tom McNeil. Contributors for this week's show include Allison Sheridan, Chris Christensen, Scott Johnson, Justin Robert Young, Patrick Norton, and Jenn Cutter. Guests on this week's show included Charlotte Henry. And thanks to all our patrons who make the show possible.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.